Okay, we're now live on YouTube. I believe we have a quorum, so it's up to you, Madam Chair, if you want to wait a few more minutes.
So with that being said, and you believing that we have a chair, I'm in a quorum, I will call the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board meeting today, Thursday, December the 3rd, at 8:30. I will call this meeting to order. At this time, we will, and you don't have to unmute yourselves, but we will say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I don't know if you can see it or not. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Thank you. We'd like to welcome all of you to the meeting this morning. And we have sent out our statement regarding our virtual meetings. That's included in our minutes. So we do not have to read that this morning. And at this time, I will ask for the roll call and the certification of our quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Charles City County, Mr. Coda. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I'm here.
Mr. Holland.
Here. Good
Mr.
morning,
Winslow.
everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Winslow. Miss Haley. Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins. Mr. Spoonhauer.
Here.
Miss Lascolette. Mr. Kilduff. Hanover County, Mr. Davis. Mr. Peterson.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. Miss Pritchard. Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Miss O'Bannon. Mr. Thornton. I see you, Mr. Thornton. Good morning. Mr. Brannon. New Kent County, Miss Page.
Present.
Mr. Tiller. Mr. Evelyn. Powhatan County, Mr. Nordvig. Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Shardine.
Here.
City of Richmond, Mr. Addison. Miss Gray. Miss Lynch. Miss Newbill. Mr. Hilbert. Mr. Jones. Miss Larson. Miss Robertson. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC Transit System, Miss Tim.
Present.
Miss Adams. Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Miss Dean. Secretary of Transportation Designee, Mr. Mann.
Here.
Mr. Riblet.
Here.
CTAC, Mr. Basham. Mr. Martin. DRPT, Ms. DeBrule.
Here.
Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Duran. Federal Transit Administration, Mr. Koenig. Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale.
Sharika Ruffin here on behalf of Vaughn Tisdale.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Ruffin.
Thank you.
And Virginia Department of Aviation, Mr. Burnett. And this concludes the roll call for attendance this morning, Madam Chair, and I can certify that we have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to administration, under A1, consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. And I'm asking if there are any changes. And being none, it's come to my attention, we don't have to have a motion and a vote on the agenda. And so we'll stand as presented. A2, approval of November 5th, 2020 TPO Policy Board Action Meeting Minutes. Were there any corrections, deletions, revisions to those minutes? Hearing none.
Madam
Nicole,
Chair, David Williams, I move for approval.
John Hodges, second.
thank you. Nicole, what was your statement you gave me this morning?
We don't need a roll call for this one. It can be approved by acclamation.
Thank you. So be it. A3 is to open our public comment period. Have we received any text, phone calls, emails from the public?
Madam Chair, this is Nicole. I did not receive anything via email.
Doing, son? Let me.
Okay. We will now close our public comment period. Item 4 is chair's report. I will, I guess before we close the meeting, I will give my comments later on in our topics. And so we will move to A5, which is our TPO Secretary's report with Mr. Parsons.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Wanted to bring your attention to the updates that are in the agenda packet. Our current work efforts should be very similar to previous months. We are continuing to work hard on our long-range transportation plan and are preparing to push out for public review, assuming everything goes well, vision, goals, and objectives for the plan. And we will get to that more later on in the meeting today. I wanted to bring your attention to our bicycle pedestrian activities again. We are continuing to work with all of you, our regional partners, on developing the update to the regional bicycle pedestrian plan. And that is going very well. And we're working on a really large data set that is a combined effort from planning and public works departments all over the region, so that we can best reflect the bicycle and pedestrian needs and for the region and influence the development of our long range transportation plan. So we're really happy with the progress we're making there. The public transportation work group, and this is kind of a CBTA update as well, is active and ready to assist GRTC in the development of the regional public transportation plan that's required under the code for the CBTA. This public transportation work group is expected to serve as kind of a steering committee for that process, and we are looking forward to working with the selected consultant and GRTC as they develop the plan over the next few months and bring that back to the CBTA at a later date. The October work program status report was in your agenda. I'd be happy to take any questions about that if there are any. Again, this is the newer format that we've started using this year, which lays out, for example, as you can see, each work task, like program management here, gives the name, the overall budget for the year, how much was billed this month, and the % of funds expended for each work task. So it lays out pretty clearly, and then the bulleted items underneath are the actual work that was performed by staff for that month. So again, to ask you to review that. If you have any questions about it at any point, let me know. And we do this every month, and we also do quarterly reports back to VDOT. So following that, I wanted to bring to your attention the draft 2021 board and committees meeting schedule. It really follows the same layout that we've used before, and the same days per month. So if you've already got these programmed into your calendar, it shouldn't be a big departure from what's there. But this is there for your review and consideration. And note that the Community Transportation Advisory Committee meets bi-monthly. So every other month they'll have a meeting, and then our work groups and ad hoc committees will meet as needed. Those aren't included on this the official board and advisory committee schedules, but we do have a fair number of work groups that are active right now, and those are scheduled as needed throughout the year. And Madam Chair, I believe there's a CBTA update. I think I'll just say that a number of you, or most of you, are included on the CBTA board. That authority meets tomorrow morning. So seems like there's a meeting every other day right now with CBTA or a CBTA committee. There are some things on the agenda for tomorrow, including many of the startup items that the CBTA is still considering, like RFPs for insurance services. We are looking at approving the VDOT revenue transfer memorandum of agreement, and that's really a lot of the work that the two committees have been working on as well, the TAC and the Finance Committee. If anyone has any questions about the CBTA, I'd be happy to take those as well. We do have a pretty full agenda today, and I think I know many of you are excited about seeing what's to come. So, Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Chair, for the update. Do we have any questions or comments? Thank you for the update. We will now move on to our new business. And item 1 is the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation passenger rail update with Ms. Mitchell.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. It's great to see you all. I do have a presentation. I'm not sure if Nicole, if you've got that handy or for sharing on the screen.
I can, yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So while she's pulling that up, I was here to talk with you all today about some of the work that we're doing in Virginia with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Great, thank you, Nicole. Which is our new Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative, which you may have heard a little bit about, particularly some improvements up in Northern Virginia, but all of this is going to be extremely important to Richmond in the future as well. So next slide. So a little bit about Virginia in the context of the East Coast Rail Network. Virginia is very much at the crossroads of our rail on the entire East Coast, as well as a number of lines that are serving the Midwest, including service to and from the port of Hampton Roads, which obviously is a huge economic driver for the entire state of Virginia. I do want to point out on this slide, you'll see in Washington, D.C., where a number of lines converge. That's actually where a project called the Long Bridge is located. That's a 2-track bridge between Virginia and DC, and a huge bottleneck across the East Coast. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we do have a number of passenger lines and freight lines that all come through Virginia. So we're a very dense, rail dense state. Very important implications for freight transportation, which is a big economic driver for the Commonwealth as well. Next slide. So on our passenger rail network, as you can see, we have a number of routes serving Richmond, between Richmond and DC and the Northeast Corridor. Today we have 5 state-supported trains serving Richmond. We also have a route that extends to Roanoke today. A number of the routes to Richmond also travel onto Hampton Roads. We have 2 frequencies a day to Newport News and 2 frequencies a day, round trips a day to Norfolk as well. So next slide. So you all know I-95 very well, one of the most congested corridors in the entire United States. And really, highway congestion has been growing just unsustainably in Virginia over the last few years. The Commonwealth did a study last year to look at how we could improve transportation on I-95. And that was looking at a number of multimodal solutions in addition to potentially expanding the highway. What they found was between, if they were to add a new lane between essentially the Beltway to south of Spotsylvania near Thornburg, it would cost $12 billion a year just to add one new lane in each direction. But even worse is that by the time that that lane was constructed, about 10 years from now, it would still be just as congested in the peak as it is today. So that really points out to us that we need to look at more multimodal solutions for I-95, including rail. I-95 is a major route for freight transportation as well, up and down through the East Coast. We also have the VRE lines, commuter lines serving along the I-95 corridor, as well as Amtrak service. But points out to us why it's so important that we need to further expand rail north-south in the Commonwealth. So next slide. So that gets us to our Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. Right now, all of our passenger trains travel on privately owned Class 1 railroads. So in Virginia, that's either CSX or Amtrak. So we're not able to just add new trains as we wish. We have a very congested corridors between Richmond and DC with freight transportation and CSX's network. In the past, when we've wanted to add Amtrak service, we have to negotiate with the railroads on a piecemeal basis. So the way that we would do that is by being able to use up some of their capacity requires us to build capacity for them on their network. So that would often mean us funding new projects such as new track, or we've also funded improvements in Acca Yard north of Richmond, which helps them improve the fluidity of their network. However, this infrastructure then gets owned by the railroads themselves. So what we started to look at is how we could change things in Virginia. We are entering into a partnership with CSX where the Commonwealth is now going to own railroad. We are also going to construct about 37 miles of new track plus a new bridge, no extension to the Long Bridge. But we're doing this in a very innovative way through a partnership between us, CSX, Amtrak, and Virginia Railway Express. Next slide. So there's three major components of this new initiative. The first is acquiring right-of-way. We'll be acquiring about 350 miles of right-of-way from CSX and over 225 miles of track. And we are essentially going to be splitting the corridor between Richmond north to DC, where the Commonwealth is going to own now the tracks on the east side of the right-of-way, where CSX will always own two tracks to the west. So where there's a third track today, the Commonwealth will be acquiring that. We will also be acquiring enough right-of-way to eventually build out a fourth track. And our long-term goal here is separation. So being able to build a fully separated freight and passenger network between Richmond and DC. We don't have all the funding for that today. We're going to be building it out in phases. But as part of this program, we'll be building out the majority of improvements that are needed between Spotsylvania north to DC. Again, about 37 miles of sidings plus a new Long Bridge, two-track extension of that bridge between Virginia and DC. So as we're building out the infrastructure in phases, we're also going to be acquiring new service. So we're not building infrastructure and purchasing track just to own it. For us, it's all about being able to get new service across the state. We will be doubling our state-supported service between Richmond and DC. We will eventually have nearly hourly Amtrak service during the day between Richmond and DC. We will also be extending an additional round trip to Norfolk, as well as an additional round trip to Newport News as well. We will also be acquiring an existing line called the Buckingham Branch, which extends east and west between Doswell, west to Charlottesville and Clifton Forge. And we're acquiring that. It'll continue to be operated by a freight short line railroad called the Buckingham Branch. However, we are purchasing that to be able to potentially use it for future east-west rail service. There's a lot of interest in being able to connect places like Hampton Roads and Richmond directly to Charlottesville, Lynchburg, or Roanoke on an east-west basis without having to go all the way north into DC and then south. So next slide. So we have all of this infrastructure that we're building in Virginia, but all that does is get us to the Long Bridge, which again is a 2-track bridge today between DC and Richmond and DC and Virginia. It's owned by CSX. It is at 98% capacity during the peak period. So we really don't have the ability to add any more train service across this bridge until it's expanded. We've been working with the District Department of Transportation on this project. We've just finished the environmental study for that. We got the environmental clearance back on September 30th. The bridge itself is actually not just one bridge. It's actually a series of 5 different structures. Plus we would be building a 4th track between Alexandria to the banks of the river to be able to support a full 4-track network. So we'll be building a new 2-track bridge just north of the existing bridge, or just, upriver from the existing bridge. And that new bridge is going to be owned by the Commonwealth. So we'll have 2 dedicated tracks going across the river into DC and into Union Station. And then CSX will have 2 dedicated tracks also for their freight travel going across the river and then north towards Baltimore. So next slide, please. So with all of this, we'll be getting new service as we build out infrastructure in phases. So once we close on the deal with CSX, which we expect to be early next year, we would have the, the rights to have 1 new state-supported train, which will be a round trip to and from Norfolk, and that will be serving Richmond as well. And then as we build out what we call our phase 1 infrastructure, we'll be getting, and that should be completed around 2026. We'll be getting a new round trip to Richmond as well as a new round trip to Newport News. Once we complete the 2nd phase of the infrastructure, which includes completion of the new Long Bridge, we'll be adding 3 new round trips to Richmond as well. We expect to have that completed by 2030. Next page. And with this, we will also be getting more VRE service as well. So I think we jumped a couple slides ahead. That's, thank you. Okay, VRE again is the commuter rail service between Spotsylvania north to DC. Very important to us because it takes a lot of traffic off of I-95. There's actually a number of commuters from Richmond that use this service by traveling up to Spotsylvania and then taking the train every day into DC. So with this, we'll be acquiring, we'll be getting the rights to operate 5 new VRE slots on the Fredericksburg line by 2030. It'll also include some evening service and weekend service as well. Next slide. So what does this mean to Virginia? This is very, very significant economic impacts of about $3 billion in direct impacts after constructing the bridge, as well as additional jobs that will be created from the operations as well. Most importantly, though, the addition of the workers that will be using rail transportation will add about $6 billion a year to the DC economy, which is, again, really an economic driver for the whole state. This is going to have tremendous economic benefits as well to the port. The Port of Virginia is looking to expand their capacity by about 40%, which means also expanding their rail capacity today from about 30% up to 40% of their mode share. So taking a lot of trucks off of I-64 and I-95. Next slide. So where we are right now, as I mentioned before, we just received the environmental clearance for the Long Bridge project in September. That means we can now move forward into engineering and design. We have some regulatory findings that we are working on through the Surface Transportation Board. We're negotiating and finalizing our agreements with CSX right now, Amtrak as well, and also the Virginia Railway Express. We are still negotiating the terms of those agreements. We do expect to be done with those negotiations soon, but still in a very much getting all of this in place. We're working on our funding plan as well. The total project or the total program of projects is expected to be $3.7 billion. Amtrak will be contributing nearly $1 billion towards that as part of our partnership with them. In addition, we'll be utilizing some other state rail sources, other statewide transportation funds, and regional funds from Northern Virginia, also including about $200 million in funding from Virginia Railway Express through some of the dedicated commuter rail funds that they have. Once we enter into all of our agreements, we will be assigning them to the new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. We'll talk about in a moment. And we're beginning, again, the design and engineering for the Long Bridge to move that forward. So next slide, please. So in the General Assembly last year, they created a new entity called the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. And as we were working through these agreements with CSX, also looking at expanding the Long Bridge, we looked at a number of different governance options for having an agency that's now going to own right-of-way and be able to enter into long-term agreements with operators such as Amtrak and VRE. And what we kept coming back to was a new entity very similar to the Virginia Port Authority that operates the ports on Hampton Roads, that can still be a governmental entity, but operate in a much more business-like way. So the new authority will be able to enter into long-term agreements for designing, building, and constructing the rail infrastructure that I mentioned before, as well as the new Long Bridge. They'll be able to receive grants directly from USDOT, and if needed, they can use an eminent domain authority for rail facilities. The new Passenger Rail Authority will not be directly operating service. They'll still enter into agreements with Amtrak and Virginia Railway Express to actually operate the passenger rail services we have in the state today. It is governed by a 15-member board, including some appointees from the Richmond area. We've had one board meeting so far. We're going to have another meeting on December 14th. So we are very much in the phase of getting the rail authority mobilized with staffing so that they can begin to take over the new passenger rail programs from DRPT. So next slide. So this is what it means for rail in the state. So today, DRPT has all of our passenger and freight rail functions under its roof. In the future, we'll be splitting that out so that passenger rail programs will now be overseen by the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. DRPT will still continue to maintain responsibilities for statewide planning. So the Rail Authority will really be an implementing arm, implementing projects that are still identified by the state and the Commonwealth Transportation Board. In addition to that, the Passenger Rail Authority will now be taking on design and construction responsibilities, as well as owning and acquiring right-of-way as well. DRPT is going to continue to provide the staffing support to the Rail Authority while we are still mobilizing it. And we are in the process of recruiting for an executive director that will probably be out on the street very soon, and staffing up over the next 6 to 12 months as well. Next slide. So DRPT will continue to have freight rail programs. We do have about $11 million a year that will still be used for freight projects across the state. They'll still be implementing the Short Line Rail Preservation Fund, and this is a fund that we have for a number of smaller railroads across the state that provide very much needed access into the Class 1 system. In addition, DRPT will continue to administer our Railway Industrial Access Program as well, which is a program where we provide grants to businesses that are building rail spurs and moving more of their freight by rail as well. Next slide. So we are in the process of developing this new freight enhancement program. We're developing some policies and procedures that we'll bring into our Commonwealth Transportation Board soon. Entities such as railroads, but also public entities, will be eligible to apply for funds for upgrades to freight rail infrastructure as well, We'll develop an objective scoring process for those projects, so that, and then we can program those in the state's 6-year plan as well. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the planning activities that DRPT is doing right now. DRPT is still very engaged in regional rail planning across the Commonwealth, very involved in the Southeast Rail Commission, which includes states Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, as well as Georgia and Florida as well, working to implement future higher speed rail, but additional frequencies throughout the Southeast corridor, and then feeding into the Northeast corridor. DRPT is still overseeing our statewide rail plan. We finished that about 3 years ago. It's something we update every 5 years. So we're actually going to be in the process of beginning that planning next year. That rolls up into the state's statewide plan, which is called VTrans. Many of you are probably familiar with that. We're also supporting the statewide freight advisory committee and continuing to coordinate with MPOs such as this one across the state as well. Next slide. We are continuing to advance our corridor planning, which is between Richmond and DC, called our DC to RVA study. We're developing a service development plan that fits very much into the work we're doing with CSX and the new service we're acquiring, but also for additional frequencies that we hope to add subsequent to this work through 2045. We're also working on the Commonwealth Corridor Study, which is looking at that corridor I mentioned between Doswell to Charlottesville and the potential for future east-west service. We're beginning that study early this year. In addition to that, we are working with the I-81 Commission to identify multimodal projects such as passenger rail to the New River Valley or additional frequencies to Newport News, as well as potentially freight rail improvements in the 81 corridor too. We're working on a number of station planning efforts, including Staples Mill. I'll talk about that in a moment. Also looking at improvements in Charlottesville. We're doing a study at Bedford and Culpeper. One thing that's not on here, but that we are starting this year is actually some station improvements at Ettrick near Petersburg. And we are going to be upgrading the platform there, also providing lighting and upgrading the parking lot there as well. We'll be doing that with statewide funds over the next 2 years. Next slide. So a little bit more about Staples Mill. This is a project that we're advancing now through the DC to RVA study. We did about 10% conceptual design for this. We're now advancing that to 30% preliminary engineering, which we expect to have completed later this month. We're working very closely with our stakeholders such as Amtrak, CSX, GRTC, which this would have additional transit access as well, and Henrico County. This is really designed to be the real long-term station of the future. It'll be able to accommodate both the additional round trips that we're adding through our Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative, plus an additional 4 future trains to the southeast. So that would be handling an additional 19 round trips a day. It's about a 35,000 square foot building over 2 levels. It'll include a bus transfer facility, also more TOD connections there in Henrico County, and more better pedestrian and bike access as well. Next slide. And since we do also get asked a lot about Main Street service, our long-term plans through DC to RVA is to have all of our state-supported rail service that goes to Hampton Roads, as well as our Richmond originating trains, to actually originate and serve Main Street Station as well. However, in order to do that, we do need to make a number of improvements to be able to even add those 4 additional round trips to Main Street Station. These, I should note, are improvements that are not yet funded through our Transforming Rail initiative. We are going to continue to seek additional funds in order to start implementing some of these, so that as we are adding service through this Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative, we'll be able to start providing more service to Main Street Station. We do need to complete a new storage facility, which would be in the East End, somewhere in the Fulton area. We would have to expand the bridge across the James River. We would have to expand the new west platform at Main Street Station, and then a number of additional track improvements, which would be south of the James River, serving those Norfolk lines, as well as north into Aka Yard as well. So these are all things that we're continuing to do the planning on, identifying how much this could cost, and looking at additional funding sources that we could potentially bring to adding this service incrementally over the next 10 to 15 years as well. Next slide. And we're continuing to work with our partners with the Federal Railroad Administration in North Carolina. We completed a rail study, I think that was wrapped up about 2 years ago, as part of the FRA's Southeast High-Speed Rail Initiative. It was our Raleigh to Richmond study. Long-term plans would be to continue to double service between Richmond and North Carolina, and also to improve the speeds for those services. As part of our deal with CSX, we're acquiring a line called the S line. It's today an abandoned rail line between Centralia south to, we'll be acquiring it to Ridgeway, North Carolina. North Carolina DOT is currently working with CSX to acquire the portion of that from Raleigh to Ridgeway. The long-term goal here is to be able to build a fully dedicated passenger rail track on this abandoned line. Today, the fastest that we can go on tracks that are commingled with freight is 79 miles per hour. We hope to be able to increase that to 90 miles per hour in the future. With a fully dedicated line like the S line, we could go up to 110 miles per hour. That would cut the current travel time between Richmond to Raleigh, which is currently about 3 hours and 36 minutes. It would cut it down to about, by about 80 minutes, down to just over 2 hours. So very important to the long-term future of the Southeast and Southeast High-Speed Rail is being able to put this, the S line back in service. So again, this is not a funded project at this point in time. We're going to continue working with Amtrak as part of our partnership with them to identify the improvements that would be needed to put rail out there. Next slide. And that is it. I am happy to take questions. Thank you again for having me here, and look forward to continuing to engage you all in the work that we're doing on rail across the state.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. I wanted to ask if anyone has any questions.
Madam Chair, John Hodges.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to thank Ms. Mitchell for a wonderful detailed presentation, which I hope is available for access, I'm sure, on our website. I want to share with other council members in Ashland. I did want to make a comment, as this is an excellent plan going to 2045, but the town supports even longer range planning. One of the biggest bottlenecks besides the Long Bridge is the switch in trains in DC from electric to fossil fuels. I didn't know if there was any long range planning going on to switch the area south to electricity.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's a very good point. Today, if any of you have ever taken the train up to north of DC, you would know that you have to actually wait in Union Station for about 20 to 30 minutes while Amtrak changes out locomotives. And that's because we don't have electrification south of DC, but the Northeast Corridor, where Amtrak and its Acela service as well goes forth, is electrified. There are no plans at this point to electrify Virginia, but we're working with Amtrak. They're in the process of acquiring a new fleet and a new fleet of locomotives that are going to be dual mode. So with dual mode locomotives, they'd be able to just seamlessly travel between the Northeast Corridor to the Southeast without having to make that stop, and which will have huge improvements for travel time. Now, these are still a ways off. It's a very, it's going to be an expensive proposition. We're working with all the states that have Amtrak service across the country and Amtrak to develop a funding plan for those as well. So, but that is part of Amtrak's plans. They're doing the engineering for those, and I believe they have a procurement underway to get that started too. So.
Thank you. That's
Sure.
very helpful.
Are there any other questions or comments? Again, Ms. Mitchell, thank you so much for your
Madam
presentation.
Chair, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. This is Larry Nordvig from Powhatan, and
Mhm.
I checked on about 10 minutes late because I had a little trouble linking up today. I do have
No worries.
a question for Ms. Mitchell, if that's all right.
Mhm. Please.
All right, Jennifer, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. I'm going to say some pluses and some minuses, and I don't want you to think that I'm popping your balloon or anything. I really enjoyed the presentation. It was very professional, very thorough, and very helpful. I do have I'll wrap this up at the end with a big question. So allow me a minute here. I've used VRE several times. I agree, it definitely beats I-95 traffic. When I've been going up to DC, believe it or not, I have experience on the Buckingham Branch Railroad. I've volunteered with a railroad club, so I'm familiar with the track layouts and how that all operates out there, and the shunt lines and stuff. My grandfather worked on the railroads for 30 years, and his gold watch is about 4 feet away from me right now, hanging on a hook. And also, I was a American Airlines pilot for a few decades, and we work under the Railway Labor Act. There's a lot of similarities with scheduling and terminal usage and renting common space. An airway is a lot like a railroad track. There's only one. You can't really stray from it much. And so multiple companies have to use the same tracks, if you will. So here's where I'm going with this. This is an immensely expensive undertaking. And the reason most of us are here, the elected officials, is because we're shepherding taxpayer money, and we're accountable to the people for decisions that we're making and the money we're spending. So I'm looking at this as, if money dumped from the sky, I'd want every bit of it and more. So nothing wrong with the plan per se, but I'm wondering about options here. For one thing, you mentioned Amtrak would be a partner. Well, that sort of helps and it sort of doesn't, because Amtrak is heavily subsidized by taxpayer money already. So it's not that beneficial to my next door neighbor's wallet that we're partnering with Amtrak. I've noticed over the years, as I've used Amtrak, not VRE per se, but Amtrak itself, kind of poor performance out of that company, and they don't pay any penalty for that, really. The ticket prices compared to airlines are considerably higher, sometimes 4 and 5 times as much to get to the same destination. It takes a lot longer. And they'd be even higher if they weren't getting a lot of help from us. So where I'm going with this is, just like the airlines, you have to compete for jet bridge leases, but they're all leaving from the same airport. So if you consider the airport a railroad yard, and you consider the airway like a railroad track, has anybody looked at allowing private companies, instead of Amtrak, to perform these services, or maybe alongside Amtrak, and compete for track space and scheduling? And they'd have to run a nice lean operation. Ticket prices would have to be reasonable when competition comes up like that. And probably what I'm seeing here is maybe a better way to do this would be like the airlines, who do receive some federal subsidies, a public-private partnership to bring the costs down, bring the service up, and still accomplish this very aggressive and detailed and wonderful plan. So can I get your comments on that? Has anybody looked into that fully? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, no, and thanks for your comments. And you're right. There's a lot of analogies between rail and the airline industry. Probably the biggest difference, though, at least in Virginia, is that we run on privately owned tracks. And so CSX and Norfolk Southern do own the tracks. So then we do need to partner with them. Although, as I mentioned before, we'll be acquiring now tracks from CSX as part of this. There are private railroad operators around the United States, and some really exciting work that's being done in Florida, also Texas. Is working on a pretty exciting public-private partnership right now. High-speed rail proposals between Las Vegas and California as well that are looking at public-private partnerships too. All of them, though, are still pretty expensive and still do involve some measure of public subsidy to them. There's really not a mode of transportation, I think, that doesn't have some public subsidy in it. In Virginia, we are still partnering with Amtrak for our future passenger rail service, partially because we'll be operating into the Northeast Corridor and into Union Station, which is owned by Amtrak. But there are, I would say, future opportunities to bring private rail up. I think private rail operators into the network. I think you'll start to see that more and more in the future as services diversify. The service in Florida that I mentioned is actually one of the benefits that they have is they're partially owned by a freight railroad that owns the right of way that they're operating on. So they have some really exciting opportunities available to them there. So anyway, I think my personal opinion is that in the future we'll start to see more sort of private third-party operators that will be operating. Now, VRE that you mentioned is actually operated by a private company that they enter into an operating agreement with. So there are models like that in Virginia and around, definitely around the country. So, but I appreciate the question. It's a dynamic industry and there's a lot changing. And I think we'll see a lot of big changes in the next 10 years. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions or
Yeah,
suggestions?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
this is
sir.
Supervisor Holland of Chesterfield County. I want to thank Ms. Mitchell for an outstanding presentation. I greatly appreciate it because I strongly believe rail is our future as well. One question, Ms. Mitchell, Jennifer, in regards to Hampton Roads, as you mentioned, specifically Virginia Beach, Richmond to Virginia Beach Avenue, what is anything exciting planned for that in terms of lower cost, greater access, frequency?
Yeah, so today we don't have service that extends all the way into Virginia Beach. We have service that terminates in Newport News and then service that also terminates in Norfolk. But we do have bus services that then feed Virginia Beach from there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually buy a ticket, we call a throughway ticket from Virginia Beach, but it's a bus connection to Norfolk or a bus connection to Newport News, and then you get on the train from there. So, and that'll continue to be the case in the future. With this initiative, we'll be adding a new round trip to Norfolk and a new round trip to Newport News. So by the time those are implemented, we'll have 3 round trips a day, and pretty good. The schedules are actually designed to provide pretty frequent service throughout the day as well. And with those bus connections, you can actually have people that, in Virginia Beach that leave on a train through Newport News in the morning, but come back on the train through Norfolk in the evening. So that's the great thing about all those bus connections as well, is that they can use one or the other line.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for the question. Any other questions or comments? Again, thank you, Ms. Mitchell, for your very informative presentation, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to see you all. So
you as
all
well.
Right.
Bye. Under new business, B2, MPO boundaries and rural jurisdictions for the TPO boundary adjustments. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is an item that was first discussed by this group at its October meeting. And I believe Mr. Williams is on the phone with us, but I wanted to go through, this is in the agenda packet. This is a staff report regarding the RRTPO boundary adjustment. And just a little bit of the background I'm going to go through for anybody that was not able to attend at that point. At the October meeting, Mr. Williams requested that the TPO consider the opportunity to expand its boundary to match both the Plan RVA boundary, otherwise known as Planning District 15, and the CBTA boundary. Both of those cover each of our jurisdictions, and with a particular focus on full coverage of Goochland, Powhatan, New Kent, and Charles City counties. Right now, as you all know, we have partial coverage in the TPO study area, and that is has changed over the years in terms of what is included and what is not. And at the October meeting, Mr. Williams made the request. The TPO then asked the TAC to take 2 meetings, a couple months, and look into what the pros and cons were of expanding the boundary, and to come back to this body with a recommendation. Following that meeting, I held subsequent conversations with Mr. Duran from Federal Highways, who I believe is with us today, and then also with Dan Lisi, former Director of Transportation here at Plan RVA, because the last time this was discussed was, I believe, 2013, 2014, and I think it was a good conversation. There was a lot of information shared at that point, which I coordinated and put together to share with our TAC so they can make an informed recommendation. At that point, the change did not get made, but again, this is a new time and a new opportunity to think about the boundary and what the implications are. So at the October meeting, again, we determined that the boundary can be expanded from time to time to adapt to the growth of the region. The metropolitan planning area is required to be evaluated following every census. So the next time period for regular evaluation of the MPA would be a few years from now, 2022, 2023. Right now, expanding the boundary to include all of Charles City, Goochland, New Kent, and Powhatan counties would present the following considerations. So it would match the boundary of Plan RVA and the CBTA, and could help to increase public awareness and understanding of the TPO, as well as general uniformity region-wide. Right now, if you ask me, I may be, me and my staff, we may be some of the few people that actually understand what the reasoning is for where the boundary is right now. And I think that having a common boundary would make sense if we're trying to get the public more engaged in the work that we do, so that it's easier to understand. Expanding the boundary would free up an opportunity for those 4 jurisdictions to apply for RSTP, and in particular cases, CMAQ funding, because the geographic area would be wider, and projects in that current rural area, with air quotes, would be available for additional funding opportunities. The downside of changing the boundary is that our current rural transportation planning assistance from VDOT would be unavailable if all 4 jurisdictions made that change. Right now, that equates to roughly $58,000 annually that is used mostly for staff time to provide planning assistance for various projects and activities. We have used that well in the past. I think we provided some service to these 4 counties that is beneficial. But when you weigh that $58,000 versus what could be available through RSTP or CMAQ, it's a big difference in the amount of funding available. You can leverage a lot more funding through the RSTP CMAQ application process. Since that October TAC meeting, staff has held individual discussions with each of the 4 rural jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction has expressed interest in expanding the urbanized area to make that planning area boundary the same as for Plan RVA and the CBTA. One thing to note: this consideration does not include expansion of the southern boundary of Chesterfield County to include all of Chesterfield, because right now there's a split between Tri-Cities MPO and the Richmond Regional TPO. That would remain the same. The TAC considered all the information presented at its November meeting and recommends that the policy board proceeds with the process of changing its metropolitan planning area boundary as proposed. And that really means that with action today, it doesn't mean that the boundary has changed. It means that we start the conversation with VDOT and with Federal Highways to work through that process and show support at the TPO level for making that change. The eventual, when we get to that point, the eventual boundary change will be something that is solidified through agreement with the governor and through our partners at VDOT, and we would work towards that end if the body, if that's the wishes of the body today. So the action request, the staff recommendation concurs with the technical advisory committee recommendation supporting the expansion of the RRTPO metropolitan planning area to include the entirety of Powhatan, Goochland, New Kent, and Charles City counties. The action requested, the following resolutions presented for RRTPO Policy Board approval: that the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board approves the update of the metropolitan planning area boundary to include the entirety of Powhatan, Goochland, New Kent, and Charles City counties. Be it further resolved that the RRTPO supports the initiation of necessary procedures with the Virginia Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, and the Governor of Virginia to officially recognize this boundary adjustment. That's the staff report. I'd be happy to take any questions, or if anyone has further comments, this will be a great time to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions and comments at this time? The floor is open.
Madam Chair, this is Canova Peterson, Hanover County.
Good morning.
Good morning. As I understand it, the current MPO boundaries were set basically primarily because of air quality conditions. Reason that parts of these counties did not have air quality problems. So would that essentially be, even if we expand these, the availability of CMAQ funds is probably still pretty unlikely for those portions of those jurisdictions, I would think. RSTP, yes. Am I correct on that, Mr. Parsons?
Yes, sir, you are correct. There would be, based on previous air quality issues, the CMAQ funds would be available for Charles City, but we believe that would be it. I don't believe New Kent is eligible, but we would certainly confirm that as we move through the process. It's mostly I-95 East.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'm David Williams.
Good morning, Ms. Williams.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move for approval of the resolution expanding the MPO boundary to include all of Planning District 15.
I'll second that.
Nicole, did you get the second?
I did not get the second.
Neil Spoonhour, second.
Thank you, Mr. Spoonhour.
Okay, at this time, it has been moved in second, and we will have a roll call vote.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for clarity's sake, that Mr. Williams, the motion was to adopt the resolution as presented, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Gregory. The board will now be voting on item number B2, the RRTPO boundary adjustments. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Nordvig.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mr. Addison.
Aye.
GRTC Transit System, Ms. Tim.
Aye.
RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Aye.
And Secretary of Transportation Designee, Mr. Mann.
I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for item B2, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now we will begin the work for the adjustments of the MPO boundaries. Moving to B3, Connect RVA 2045 update with the vision, goals, and objectives.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Let me share my screen first. Yep. So I'll be updating the policy board on the Connect RVA 2045. I provided an update in October as well. As we all know, Connect RVA 2045 is a federally mandated long-range transportation plan for the Richmond region. It's a huge undertaking which we take every 5 years. The plan would develop vision for the next 20 years for transportation improvements or multimodal transportation improvements in the Richmond region. The plan also includes a constrained list of projects based on the revenue projection, which would be provided by VDOT as well as DRPT. This is the region's first performance-based plan, meaning that the LRTP will apply a systematic review of transportation system performances to define the region's transportation priorities. In other words, this plan would be a goal-based, need-based, and a performance-based plan. The LRTP is spearheaded by the LRTP Advisory Committee, which consists of our TAC members, CTAC members, as well as members from other agencies like the Virginia Asian Chamber of Commerce, Bike Walk RVA, RVA Rapid Transit, etc. This is the LRTP process flow, and I guess the board is familiar with this at this moment. It consists of mainly 6 phases. The first phase is transportation needs assessment, in which we develop the population and employment data for the future. We look at the transportation needs and issues and based on the studies and the analytical tools which we have, and we make a list of all those issues. The second phase is the static direction, which we'll be talking in detail today. This phase is all about development of vision, goals, and objectives for the plan. The third phase is planning, in which the transportation needs would be addressed through project alternatives. And at this moment, the needs have already been approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee, and we are working with the localities as well as other agencies to develop the projects which would be reasonably significant and which would be considered as the universe of projects for the long-range transportation plan. The fourth phase is the programming, in which we look at the revenue projections from VDOT and DRPT, and we score all the projects. As we all know, funds are limited. and we are subscribed much more than the amount of funds we have. So we'll develop a project prioritization process in which all the projects would be prioritized and ranked. This process, we are working with the LRTP Advisory Committee on developing the process right at this moment. The fifth phase is the evaluation of the plan. As it's a performance-based plan, we have to evaluate the plans on the plan in certain things like the environmental justice assessment, the accessibility which the plan would implement or increase, as well as our public participation evaluation. And then finally, this board will be asked for adoption of this plan around October of 2021. So the main discussion today is about the second phase of the plan, which is strategic direction. The objective of this task is to develop vision and goals for the long-range transportation plan. Along with the vision and goals, we also need to develop objectives and performance measures within each goal, which could measure the achievement towards the goal. So as you can see in the graphics, the task flow, this topic was firstly introduced to the LRTP Advisory Committee, and they asked us to take a massive public input in this process. So we conducted a series of surveys to have public input. Once we got the results from the surveys, staff synthesized the survey and came up with the vision, goals, and objectives based on the public input, which was discussed in the LRTP Advisory Committee, and the Advisory Committee also provided some of their input. Today, this is the first time the board would be introduced to the vision, goals, and objectives. And we are also requesting the policy board to open a 15-day public review period today. Once that public review period would be over and we receive comments, it will come back to the policy board most probably next month in January, and we'll ask the policy board for the adoption. So so that all of us are in the same line, these are the definitions mostly taken from the Federal Highway Guidance, in which we are basing our vision, goals, and objectives. So for the vision statement, it will describe Richmond Region's transportation aspirations in a concise manner, focus on what is important, and provide a foundation for all other aspects of the plan. The goals will describe a series of desired states for the region's transportation system, which would be informed by the vision, and the goals will provide foundation for the objectives and the performance measures. The objectives will describe specific measurable statements that support achievement of the goals. And then we come to very technical performance measures, which is basically the data which provides technical mechanism to monitor the progress towards all other aspects of the plan, which is the objective, goals, and the overall vision. The goals, there is a lot of federal requirements which we have to address. We have to address the federal planning factors which came out from the FAST Act. As you can see, there are 5 planning factors which we need to address. And it's basically concerning about safety, the preservation of existing system, efficient system management, support the economic vitality, look at the environment as well, overall increase accessibility and mobility to both people as well as goods, enhance the integration between modes, increase the security in transportation system, improve system resiliency and reliability, as well as enhance travel and tourism. Similarly, we have to address MAP 21 goals. MAP 21 is the federal transportation legislation which came before the FAST Act, and these goals are carried over in FAST Act as well. So same thing, safety, we have to look at the infrastructure condition, congestion, system reliability, freight movement, environmental sustainability, and then this is the new one, reduce project delivery delays. As I mentioned earlier, staff conducted a series of surveys, and based on those surveys, we got the transportation priorities from the public. this first survey, the regional goals and priority surveys, we asked for transportation priorities, and as you can see, safety has been ranked the highest transportation priority in the Richmond region based on public input, followed by environmental quality, accessibility, land use, economic development, and congestion, as we can all see, is the least important priority for the Richmond region, which is in quite contrast with Northern Virginia. Then we also started another survey, the Vision, Goals, and Strategies survey, and also asked for the goals ranking. Again, we can all see that the safety was ranked higher, health and equity, connectivity, accessibility, environment ranked after that, and then maintenance and operations, which includes congestion, is also again ranked a little bit lower in the ranking. So staff did a synthesis on all these. We received advisory committee vision buzzwords, which I presented to the policy board in October. We conducted the regional priorities survey, which had like more than 500 completed surveys. We also did the vision and goals survey, which was around 949 surveys. We also asked the public to point out the issues in our wiki maps, which was available through our website. And then we also got 265 unique ideas for vision statements. So staff looked at all these, and based on the expertise staff have, we developed the vision goals, objectives, and performance measures for this plan based on all these public input. And this was presented to the LRTP Advisory Committee. We had a very good interactive session in which LRTP Advisory Committee provided their input. And this is what we came up with. So I'll just read out the vision. Transportation in the Richmond region will reliably connect people, prioritize interconnected opportunities for all to thrive and live healthy lives, promote economic development, respect environmental stewardship, and support an exceptional quality of life. We also came up with some guiding principles. As goals was something which we had to address based on federal requirements. We came up with these 7 guiding principles, which is kind of bridge between vision and goals. You can say that it's kind of the expansion of what the vision we have. So we have these. We came up with these 7 guiding principles. The first one is safety, a safe, well-maintained and interconnected transportation system. The second one talks about the multimodal system approach, in which we have a choice among all travel options, including passenger vehicles, trucks, rail, bars, air travel, van pooling, carpooling, transit, biking, walking, as well as micro mobility, which would include scooters as well as segways. The third guiding principle is to prioritize the completion of regional bicycle and pedestrian network. Fourth one, obviously, is transit. A transit network which delivers comprehensive, effective, and services, including areas of greatest needs and key destination. The fifth one is equity, which is an important consideration. We want to spend the transportation dollars in the region with focus on historically disregarded communities or communities of concern. The sixth one is efficient movements of goods. So this plan has to address not only the movement of people, but the movement of goods as well. So that's why we have listed out that as well. And then finally, alignment with transportation investment to land use, community health, and environmental stewardship. Then we came up with 5 goals. Safety, to improve the safety of the transportation system for the people. Environmental and land use, we joined these 2 criteria to make one goal. The statement would be to reduce the negative impact which the transport system would have on natural as well as the built environment. Equity and accessibility, improve accessibility for all mode and provide a choice for all people, including providing a focus on the historically disregarded communities or communities of concern. Economic development, improve connectivity and mobility for strong economic vitality. And then finally, mobility, which has to do with congestion as well as the maintenance of the system. So we provided a 2-page summary of the goals, vision in the agenda packet. That was a linear way to represent this, but we came up with a more graphical way in which we have listed all the vision, guiding principles, goals, and objectives, and we have also listed some icons. So this is this would be the 2 pages summary, which would be going out for the public. So what we are asking the policy board today is to review the goals, vision, and objectives and provide any comments. Secondly, to open a public review and comment period on the draft vision, guiding principle, goals, and objectives, which would run from tomorrow till December 18th, and direct staff to take all necessary steps to facilitate this public review and comment period. This, based on our public engagement plan, we will be using email addresses. We have a list of interested parties for the LRTP. List is constantly growing. We'll send email to all the people. We'll also advertise this in our social media post. We'll do a boost in Facebook as well as Twitter, and we'll send an email. So that's the resolution in front of you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have now.
Madam Chair, this is Canova Peterson, Hanover County.
Are there any questions?
Yes, so I would like to commend you on this great presentation here, well thought out. But unfortunately, the one thing that continues to bother me in all of these plans, we have great plans, but the one phase that we never seem to really address is the last one, called implementation. And right, if we go back to, I know we're on the second bubble in your diagram, but if we go all the way through, there's never anything that actually addresses how to make these things reality instead of just a continuing revolving plan. Should that be added into our process, is after adoption, implementation, number 7?
So this plan, after we have decided the vision, goals, and objectives, and we come up with the universe of projects, this is much more than just visioning, because we will look at the programming of the projects as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we look at the revenue projections, which would be based on VDOT as well as DRPT's revenue projection. We'll look at that, and we'll have the projects, and then we'll rank those projects, and those will, based on the available funding through 2045, the ranked project which made into the cut of the constraint list would be included in the constraint plan. And those projects would be prioritized in any other funding which might come, like smart scale or any other planning exercise and implementation exercise which localities as well as VDOT might take. So we have much more than planning in this programming, in this plan. But as you have mentioned, we don't have that implementation schedule. We just list a project and then we just prioritize those. And whenever the funding is available or whenever there is the right moment, those projects get completed.
Mr. Peterson, this is the beauty of the CVTA and having the ability now to identify additional funds that can be used to advance projects. In the past, we didn't have that opportunity. So as we move into the next year, I think the ability to leverage more dollars in the region for implementation of the projects identified in this planning process is going to be very real, which is something we haven't had the ability to do before. So I'm excited. I think the implementation is one of those things that we're going to have to start figuring out more over the next few years, and how we can work better with VDOT and federal partners to make sure that the dollars are there and we can get projects moving.
Thank you very much, Chet and Sulab. I think it's just important that we actually start getting these things done. So,
All right. Any other
I'll make-
questions or comments? If
I'll
not,
make the
Chair will
motion
entertain a
to-
motion.
I certainly want to make a comment in concert with Mr. Peterson Canovas. I appreciate that. Do we have a timeline which shows completion of parts of the project as we do those, and that is communicated? Is my question. This is Jim Holland.
So based on the funding revenue, which is from 2026 to 2045, we break down that period into time bands of 6 years each. So based on the project ranking and the importance, the project is listed within a particular time band.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Great report.
Madam Chair, I will move for approval of the resolution as presented.
Madam Chair, this is Jim Holland. I will second that motion.
Thank you. We've heard the motion in a second. Nicole, will you poll the members, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. The board will now be voting on item number B3. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Mr. Thornton. Mr. Thornton, I can't hear you, but I can see you. Do you want to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down? That's a thumbs up from Henrico County. Thank you. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Nordvik.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mr. Addison.
Aye.
GRTC, Ms. Tim. RMTA, Ms. Dean.
I was aye. I'm sorry. I couldn't get unmuted. This is Julie.
Thank you. RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Aye.
And Secretary of Transportation Designee, Mr. Mann.
Aye.
This concludes the roll call for B2.
This is Mr. Carroll. Were you able to
Thank
hear my
you.
vote?
Mr. Carroll, I did.
Mr. Carroll.
Thank you. I
Were
did
you
not
able to hear
record
my
a vote
vote?
for you. I did
It
not.
was aye.
Thank you,
It was
sir.
aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Moving on to under new business, item number 4.
Ms. Page, this is Chet Parsons. In the interest of time,
I'm sorry, I can't.
I wanted to raise a question. If there are members of the board that are planning on attending the governor's conference at 10, I believe that we could provide item B4 as an information item in the agenda. There isn't any action requested, but I know Mr. Ariel is here to discuss it if the board would like to receive the presentation. Otherwise, we can move on to our partner agency updates and let folks attend the governor's conference.
Absolutely. If there's no objection, we will move on to C, which is agency and committee reports, starting with VDOT.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick update, I'll go through real quick. CTB, the last meeting was in November. They received a presentation on COVID update, financial plan and the 6-year improvement plan revised process, and also a presentation on Smart Scale Round 4, an update on that. The next CTB meeting will be a virtual meeting on December 9th. That'll be the workshop and the action meeting beginning at 9 a.m. As far as Smart Scale Round 4, validation and scoring is still underway with an anticipated completion in December this month. And the CTB will be looking at a list of potential ineligible applications that could potentially be screened out this month at their meeting. And we're expecting approval of the applications in January of 21. On the 6-year improvement plan, the revised budget will be presented to the CTB this month. The official revenue estimates for the new plan will be available this month as well. And development of the 22 to 27 6-year plan will begin in 2021. Spring update is expected to be a normal process like we're used to, not the revised one that happened this year. As far as interstate studies, all the studies are on schedule. Public information meetings will be upcoming, and we'll share that information as soon as we have it. And the only public hearing, public comment period that we have running right now is for a through truck traffic restriction in Goochland County on Route 608. The proposed restriction is about 1.11 miles. The comment period closed yesterday. So that's all I have, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. We'll move on to, I'm sorry, Mr. Winslow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question. I saw that there may be some projects that may be screened out. If it's possible, would like to see a list of what those might be. If CTB has an idea of what list that is and what those projects include, I'm sure member jurisdictions would like to know those items sooner rather than later.
Yes, sir, Mr. Winslow, this is Shane from VDOT. We'll be reaching out to the localities directly to have those discussions so that the localities will know ahead of time which applications are in question.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Again, thank you, Mr. Mann, for your presentation. Now we will have the DRPT.
Good morning. I'll also keep my report very brief. Our fiscal year 21 6-year improvement program update is scheduled to go to the board for approval on December 9th. That would provide the funding for the remainder of this fiscal year for operating expenses and then for capital requests from agencies like GRTC, Ride Finders, and enables those programs to continue to move forward. We have opened our application cycle for fiscal year 22. That opened earlier this week. We'll accept those applications through the 1st of February, and hopefully getting us back to our normal 6-year program cycle. I also wanted to give you a brief update on our Virginia Breeze. This is our state-supported intercity bus service that provides connections through Richmond. Our Capital Connector route is doing very well. This was a new service that just went into place back in August. We are seeing steady growth in ridership, carrying almost 400 passengers in the month of November. We are monitoring the situation with COVID very closely, and we're maintaining capacity at 50% on those vehicles. But it is nice that we are able to provide another transportation option that's connecting through Main Street Station on a daily basis. The last thing I'll mention is Director Mitchell said in her presentation, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, their next meeting is December 14th. That concludes my report for this month.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Any questions or comments? Thank you again. On the C2, the Community Transportation Advisory Committee meeting report.
Yes, ma'am. I don't believe Mr. Basham is with us. The CTAC did meet, and the summary report of their meeting is included on page 34 of your agenda. If any questions or comments, please direct them to staff, and we can follow up.
Thank you. We move on to other business, future meeting topics. Do we hear any? The chair will acknowledge them for the members. If you have meeting topics that you would like to bring to our next agenda in January. If so, and you don't have them today, if you would email them to Nicole or Mr. Parsons, we will absolutely review them and put them on the agenda, or discuss them and put them on the agenda. Member comments at this time. Any comments from our members? I would like to take this opportunity to, because we will be seeing each other probably in other meetings, but not with the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, to take the opportunity to wish each of you a very merry and a very safe Christmas. It has been quite a year. However, I feel as though this organization has met the challenges and will continue to strive in excellence as we move into the new year. So we do ask that we pray that you will have a very blessed holiday season, and that you and your family will be safe. And we appreciate your commitment to this organization. And we are grateful for the staff that we have, to you, Chad, and your staff, for all that you have done this year during the challenges that have been presented. So we thank you so very much. Are there any other comments? So our next meeting will be on January the 7th, 2021. And if there's no objection, we will say that this meeting now stands in adjournment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Great
Merry
job.
Christmas to all of you. Bye.
Congratulations, Frank. You know I'm waving at you, man. You're doing great things. You're doing great things over there.
Okay.
Absolutely, Mr. Thornton. Take care, all.